talking about business process automation. Now, if you have followed this podcast for any length of time, you know that this is one of the things that I talk about a lot. The most important thing about business process automation is that you want to identify what to automate, document the process, identify the solution, and then automate it. This can be a huge thing in your business. And I think a lot of people don't realize that business automation can happen with just about everything that you do. It's just a matter of thinking outside the box. Now, you know that I use Infusionsoft for my business, and I know that that system could literally launch the space shuttle. But here's what you can do with maybe not a system as comprehensive as that. You could do it with Drip, you could do it with MailChimp. There's so many other options. So don't feel like if Infusionsoft isn't in your wheelhouse yet, that you can't do any of it, because you absolutely can automate so many things. So in today's episode, we're going to be diving into all things automation. One of the most important ways that we have improved automation within our insurance brokerage business is during open enrollment. So what open enrollment is, if you're not familiar with it, it basically is a time frame from November 1st to December 15th where everyone who doesn't have access to group or employer health insurance enrolls through the state exchange. So that's basically a month and a half roughly of everyone purchasing insurance. So for us, it's a high volume situation. We're on limited time because of course we have quite a few clients. We want to make sure that every single person gets the time that they need to discuss the changes, or whether they want to renew their current coverage, what else is out there, anything to do with their health insurance. This is really the time to do it. Now, one thing that we discovered in the very beginning was that we have a huge volume of calls that come into the office. And it's not realistic for me as the solo entrepreneur to answer all those phone calls. Now, typically, you would hire someone, one person that would answer the phones, book appointments, things like that. But for us, that's just not a reality because there's multiple things happening at one time. Now, when I say multiple things, I mean there's calls coming in, there's calls going out, there's people scheduling appointments, there's people answering questions, there's people needing to just reach out to me about other business matters. So you can imagine this huge pool that is happening through our phone system. And it's just too much for us to manage at one time. So here's what we did do. We hired an outside call center firm. Now here's why we decided to do that, because it's not cheap, but we feel like it's the right decision because they can answer multiple calls at one time. Because my theory is when people are frustrated, they're anxious, they're nervous about renewing their health insurance coverage, we don't want to give people an opportunity to procrastinate it. We don't want people to call, leave a message, we have to call them back. It's just too much. So what's great about the system that we use is that people will always reach a person and they can schedule an appointment right then and there. So number one, we've eliminated the back and forth, which really can suck up a ton of my time, especially during a very busy time of year. Now, you've heard me talk about Calendly before, and here's what's great is those folks that work at that call center have access to that same system. So they're scheduling appointments, as well as me scheduling appointments, as well as any other place that people want to schedule. So whether that's through Facebook, whether that's online, wherever someone is at, we want to make sure that we meet them there, get them scheduled to try to make this sometimes stressful process so much quicker and easier, and people will leave us knowing, whew, that wasn't so bad. I got that all done. Now I can move on to something else. Being able to automate that process has been a game changer for my business. If you've listened to previous episodes, you've heard me talk about opening up my calendar to everyone else. So that way people can schedule, reschedule, or cancel their appointments whenever it's convenient for them. This has made a huge difference in my business. It has allowed people to schedule when it's convenient for them versus just a typical 9-to-5 business day. Another thing that I've done that I actually use not just in this very busy time of year, but I use all the time are email templates. Here is another quick and easy thing that you can do, which is essentially nothing more than a copy and a paste of a typical email that I send out. So again, we'll jump into the open enrollment time, crazy busy. But here's what happens. People will email in because they want to schedule an appointment, they have a question, something like that. So I have specific templates inside Gmail that I can just click and send back to the person that has the information. So these templates might say something like, of course, I would love to help you this year. Get your health insurance benefits renewed. Below is a link where you can schedule directly to my calendar whenever it's convenient for you. It's not necessary for me to type that email over and over and over again when I'm sending it constantly throughout that time period. You can use this templated email situation for so many things. If there are things that you're always doing, that's the perfect opportunity to use an email template. It can be a bit to set it up, but once it's going, it's amazing. Now, you can do this on your phone too. So if you're primarily using your cell phone to respond to clients, there are so many keyboard shortcuts that you can use just by typing a letter will pop up the entire message. It's all about saving time and doing these little things. Yes, the setup might take a little bit more time up front, but after that, you're good to go. Another thing that has really helped our business during this busy time is something called Google Forms. Now, we're part of the G Suite, so we pay for Google Docs, Google Sheets, all those different programs inside of the G Suite. But if you've never taken a look at Google Forms, it's definitely worth a look. So here's how I use it. One of the things that I have to do is send a spreadsheet every single week for my government contract. What I do is I could do it the old-fashioned way and go back and print my calendars every single week and go through and try to remember everybody I talk to. Or I set up a Google form with all the documentation, all the categories or columns that the spreadsheet that they need has on a Google form. It's super easy to enter in the information on that Google form, then it's automatically translated into a Google Sheet, which can then be copy and pasted into Excel workbook, which is what the government uses. This technique has saved so much time, and I really encourage you to look for any way to use Google Forms because it really can change your business. If there's something that is a task that you're like, ugh, I don't want to do this task, it's such a pain in the neck, so you end up procrastinating it, creating a Google form to simplify the process and make it so much easier to deliver that requirement. Again, another huge change in your business, because now instead of having to search through those calendars and remember what I did weeks ago, now after every appointment, it literally takes me less than a minute to enter in all the information on that Google form, and I've got everything. So at the end of the week, I can send off that spreadsheet and make sure that I'm satisfying that requirement and not holding anybody else up in their reporting with that spreadsheet. So just like I mentioned before, this week I really want you to dive in and identify things that you are doing over and over and over. Different ways that you can automate it. And listen, I know it's tough because you're like, oh, I think I manually need to do this all the time. But if you stretch yourself and think, what is a better way to innovate this? Could I automate it? How could I make this process easier for myself? You'll be surprised. And by stretching yourself just a little bit more every single week, pretty soon these monotonous tasks that you're like, oh my gosh, I don't have time because this task has been eating up so much of my week, you can begin to automate it. So remember, you want to identify what you can automate, document the process. So what different steps are you taking? Just like I mentioned about what we do with the email templates, you want to identify the solution and then automate it. So if it's email that you're struggling with, because I know I have before, those templated emails make a huge difference. If it's scheduling, if it's empowering your clients to do things for themselves versus calling back and forth and what about 2? What about 1? Morning or afternoon? Not having to deal with that has taken a huge amount of work off my plate. Is supporting someone else's small business, but also my clients love it because they can schedule and reschedule when it's convenient for them. Make sure you tune in next week for the Q&A because I'm so excited to hear all of your feedback. I know that this is going to be a big one because this is something that people reach out to me all the time about. This business process automation is huge. There's so many different resources out there. You can message me on Instagram or drop a comment below this video and I'll be sure to get back to you. See you next week.